Um, Osteoarthritis, as we said, is like wear and tear or a rusty hinge as such, that usually comes about because of a mechanical strain, as in a lifting, a pushing, a pulling, a trauma, a bang, fall that has hurt the joint, and the joint has never fully recovered, or maybe the person hasn't got a chance to recover fully and have had to stay working on the joint. So, for instance, somebody who has hurt their knee, it's got mostly better but not fully, but yet they're doing a job where it involves a lot of work on their feet or lifting through their legs or whatever, or low back. Maybe there was a wee trauma, a fall or whatever, of bike, horse, whatever, and yet their work involves a lot of lifting, pushing, pulling, and the joint is, because it's never fully recovered, it's just broken down that little bit more. So now that person still needs to do their work. They still have to get up and earn a few quid to pay for the week. And this joint never gets to fully recover, and there's a breakdown within the joint. So the lining of the joint is broken down as such, and it leads to further trouble. So you have a scenario where it's a joint that it's inflamed much easier than a normal joint. Okay, so now there is a part of this I'd like to explain, because there's a little bit of a misunderstanding around osteoarthritis, as far as I can see from experience, say, in the clinic, is there's another term called osteoarthrosis, and explaining what that is kind of will help people understand the whole scenario a little better. So we have wear and tear, okay, and wear and tear, osteoarthritis is wear and tear as we know it, and that's the way it's spoken about. But osteoarthrosis is actually the truer wear and tear. Osteoarthritis is wear and tear that's angry, okay? It's inflamed. So anything with itis on the end of it has inflammation in it. So you've appendicitis is an inflamed appendix, tendonitis is an inflamed tendon, and so on. So osteoarthritis is wear and tear that is inflamed, okay? So when we get people in, their joints are already, as I say, a bit broken down, that rusty hinge thing that I'm talking about. I can't really give them a new joint. I can't give them a new vertebra in their back. I can't give them a new disc. I can't give them a new knee as such. Obviously, they can go for surgery that will attempt these things. What we can do is we can look to get it from being inflamed and angry back down to normal wear and tear. So what I would say to a lot of people is, if they come to me with, a bad low back, and I'll say, if we were to MRI their low back, which we often do, or X-ray it, which we often do as well, and compare them to the next 10 people driving up to the roundabout outside the clinic who have no pain and no symptoms, but are, say, of the same age profile, etc., you will find that a good percentage of those also have wear and tear in their back. It's just not currently inflamed or angry. Okay, so what we do is we work to get the body back to a place where the joint is not overloaded and not inflamed, and the person can then function in their day. Does that make sense?
Yes, it most certainly does.
So
yeah.
No, I've talked for a bit there.
No, it was one of the things. So, with the osteoarthritis and the wear and tear aspect and the inflammation, I mean, that's common, isn't it? It's
very common, very common, and it's recognizable by its daily pattern as such. So it tends to be that morning stiffness, hard to kind of get going out of the bed. Once you get going and get up and moving, it tends to ease off a bit, and sometimes ease it off a lot. Once I get going, I'm okay. But you'll find later in the day, depending on what a person does, it'll be irritated by load, as in how much physical activity is done through that joint as the day is going on, as to whether it gets upset later on. And that would be a general daily pattern. If someone gets it very inflamed, it kind of, all bets are off, and it can be sore all of the time, and they can get a difficult. You'll find people complaining of, I'm getting it difficult to find a comfortable place to go asleep. They usually can get asleep. It's just if they move in their sleep, it hurts them again. Now that's usually when it's at its peak. Like I say, if we can get it back down from its angry bit, from its inflamed bit, the pattern tends to be a bit stiff in the morning, get moving okay, and tip off through the day. And if they don't overload too much, tend to be fine. Yeah, not wonderful. They're not going to be Olympians again, but they can function, do their work, and do the bits and pieces they need to do during the day. That's the recognizable pattern to it. Usually, it's in, you're talking about 40s, 50s plus. It also depends on what a person has done to themselves. I've seen people who have been very much involved in the construction industry, who have worked all hours, while they could in their 20s, and they get into their 30s and they're in awful trouble. So it all depends on load and trauma and the history with a person. So that's what we would talk a lot. We talk a lot at the beginning to find out what's this body been through, to figure out what's going on. We would do that anyway with any complaint, but we try to figure out, well, where is this coming from, and so on.
Yeah, I know guys in the Super League, by the time they hit their late 20s, early 30s, they are in bits with arthritis, like all through them. Have you come across anybody complaining then of, because you're saying it's, can be 40s and 50s, but now with smartphones, that thumb action, I've heard that, an awful lot of people are getting arthritis in their thumbs.
Yeah,
because, they're starting at, even before they're teenagers.
I haven't met teenagers as such, but I've seen a lot more, thumb traumas, irritations, inflammations, and so what would be bracketed into that arthritis, arthritis scenario.
Something to be aware of, probably.
Yeah, but then if you remember some years ago when the Wii came about, suddenly you were treating a lot of Wii type injuries, or injuries that were born out of Wii activities, because people were getting up off the couch and whipping through their shoulder and so on. Maybe possibly because they arrived at Christmas with a couple of beverages on board, and got, over enthusiastic, and overreached, and then wonder why they wake up the next day and shoulder or something is in bits, and can't figure it.
The dance mats, they were great.
I saw quite a bit of them when they came about first. Put them down as Wii injuries. Actually, that was what I, on my notes.
So basically, if people have got something that they feel is arthritis without having gone and had x-rays and everything. I mean, I know I have it in my hands, but from typing over all the years and whatever, and I particularly my thumb, so I know that when I go to you, whatever it is that it seems to loosen in my shoulders, it seems then to come down into my arms and my hand, and that loosens up. So that works, I know for a fact. But basically, anyway, they can alleviate the symptoms by reducing the inflammation.
Yeah, well, when you're saying alleviate, you see, with this, as I said, you can't replace the joint as such. No. You can't give a new joint, but you can manage the situation. And the management of it is probably the best and cleverest way to come about it. So as part of the management, there will be what treatment you do in the clinic. Also, you would chat with the person about what is their daily activity, manage them at home. So, for instance, I talk a lot about farmers this time of year. Their cattle are in the shed. They probably drive out tonight with a tractor front loader or whatever, the silage in front of all the cows along their lanes. And tomorrow morning then, because as the cows eat, they knock what other silage is there away. They can't reach it. So farmer gets up this morning or tomorrow morning, and he's out with his fork, shoving in the silage so they can eat it. Very practical stuff. Okay. But if you go into a shed that has a lane that is maybe 50, 60 meters long, and you're scooching silage in with a fork, and that's wet, heavy stuff, sometimes in clumps, and you go up and down a couple of lanes and you have a low back that has wear and tear in it, that person's back is inflamed before they're finished. They'll be stopping halfway along trying to stretch up, and they'll be, and taking a break. And then there's a bit at the end where they have to bring nuts, buckets of nuts. Usually this is the way it goes, into those that need the nuts. So by the time they're finished, their first job of the day, the back's finished, done for the day. They're inflamed for the day. So no matter what they go at for the rest of the day, they're then done. So it's a torturous day. Whereas if we look at that a little bit differently and say, well, you go down, when you pick up the fork the first time, go some of the way down and stop before the back gets sore. Go get the first set of nuts, come back, and pick up the fork, go and do a bit more, and just back and swap it back and forth between both. You've now managed the situation. So when they leave the shed, it might be a little bit later than normal, leaving the shed, as in 2-3 minutes longer. The job's done and their back's not inflamed. Or we'll talk about before they go down the yard to do the 3 or 4 things that they want to do in the morning before the 11 o'clock tea. We'll say, for example, that they'll pick them up rather than do all of one and all of the other and all of the next, because, and it's to get clever at that. It's to start to think, what am I doing with myself physically now, and how long can I do it, sustain this for before I start to inflame my back, my neck, my shoulder, and just be clever that way. And I find when the combination of both of those has really, really been successful in helping a lot of people get on with their day and get on with their life, and not need constant treatment, or not need constant drugs, as such as in, anti-inflammatories, painkillers, and so on. We find more and more people want to try to get away from those approaches, or don't want to be on them long term. I think it can be quite useful in the short term, and sometimes people are even on maintenance doses of very low levels. Some people are okay with that. Some people's systems are okay with that. Their digestive system and so on doesn't get too irritated, but others can get very irritated. And whether they want to or not, they just can't. It's just not an approach they can go with. So I find that when we treat and we manage what the person's doing and help them, educate them into how to manage their day. And sometimes it can be a bit of a shift, mental shift to, hold on a minute, they're used to the habit of a lifetime of just tearing into the day. They're busy. I'm still talking about farmers, but and I love them. I've treat loads of them. They're one of my favorite clients. We see it in all sorts of jobs, and they don't always have to be physical jobs. It could be person sitting at a desk needs to change how they're sitting, do so much, come away from it, and so on. But it's all about finding out what's the lower and upper limit of how long a person can stick at one activity, and then cleverly put something else in, maybe, but the day is still productive, but they're not overloading the joints.